Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Talks with Walt, as we are calling our readings through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We turn now to the great Song of the Open Road, passage 13. Now, I like to see passage 13, 14, and 15 as almost like a unit unto itself, so you might want to put that in your notes right away. This is the longest section of Song of the Open Road. This is the famous to section. We're going to see this 17 times the word to gets used. I like to as well think about this as the Socrates section. So influenced by Plato was, as we've said before in earlier lectures, Whitman. And I think here we're going to begin to get a sense of that. Now, our assumptions are that you've been with us at LearnStrong.net from the very beginning. Down the left-hand side, Talks with Walt. We've given intro lectures and then everything from inscriptions all the way up to and including Song of the Open Road, passage 12. Several of you are telling me that as you are annotating heavily your Leaves of Grass, beginning with that very first poem, that you've probably annotated more heavily Song of the Open Road than any other, especially in regards to earlier kind of references and echoes, as we have called them. My words echo thus in your mind is the way T.S. Eliot will say it in Burnt Norton, and we've played around with that idea. We're gonna be back to this one as well. Now, in some ways, we move in this section, 13, from a certain kind of optimism to a certain kind of pessimism or harsh criticism or critique by an outsider. And we've seen this already. I mean, this is not new to us, but we're certainly going to see it here in this reading. Now, because this passage is so long, I'm going to go ahead and just work through line by line instead of reading it as I am often wont to do. But we'll begin, of course, with the Let's Go Allons. Now, we're going to see this a couple of more times at the end of the poem. One of the reasons why students seem to love so much Song of the Open Road, it is a call. And by the end, we're going to get a sense that he's talking directly to a certain kind of individual. Whitman obviously aware of the line from Thoreau's Walden, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation." And we're certainly going to play that game at the conclusion of 13. Allons, he begins, to that which is endless as it was beginningless. And of course, we're playing all kinds of yin-yang games right at the beginning with this one. You'll remember in Cabin Ships at the very beginning of our study, this idea of endless and the idea of beginningless, his poem with antecedents, passage number 2, we stand amid time, beginningless, endless, right? And I have said to you guys, that and I really believe this, I think the only way to really read T.S. Eliot is to know your Whitman. Although, of course, he would argue against it. I think that there are a tremendous amount of influencers that are happening there to sound, of course, like Harold Bloom and his Anatomy of Influence. I think T.S. Eliot was very influenced by Whitman. Time present and time past are both perhaps present and time future contained in time past. That idea at the very beginning of Burnt Norton, we've given full lectures on that. We're going to hear more of this as we get into Leaves of Grass. And then 17:2, so let's go through them. To undergo, first and only use in all of Leaves of Grass, the word, much tramps. Believe it or not, this is the only time this word tramps gets used in all of Leaves of Grass. Of days, we think of Hesiod's, right? Works of days. Of days, rests of nights. It's always about polarities. The influence, again, of William Blake can't be overemphasized in studying Whitman. To merge, and you'll remember this word merge in Sing the Body Electric passage 5, merge of small and large. To merge all in the travel they tend to, and the days and nights they tend to. In other words, everything kind of starts. When you begin to follow Whitman's ideas, you begin to try to see patterns, right, in all that's happening in your life. And again, to merge them in the start of superior journeys. This word superior is a popular word in Leaves of Grass, so for those of you who go, wait, I've heard that word already, you're right. To see nothing anywhere but what you may reach it and pass it. We always are thinking about our King Lear when we see the word nothing. And of course the idea of meaning and passing is very evolutionary, as we've said before about Whitman. To conceive no time, however distant, but what you may reach it and pass it. This is, and I think we've said this before, and I think this is very true of Whitman. I think he genuinely believed that you and I would be having this conversation about Leaves of Grass when he was publishing and sharing these poems. He continues, to look up or down no road, but it stretches and waits for you. Remember in Song of Myself, passage 46, perhaps you've been on all your life and didn't know it. and waits for you, however long, but it stretches and waits for you. Again, back to passage 46. I think Song of Myself, as we said at the beginning, Song of Myself, passage 46, stands behind so much of what's happening in Song of the Open Road. He says it this way: to see no being, not God's, or any, but you also go thither. You'll remember in Song of Myself, passage 48, I have said that the soul is not more than the body. I've said that the body is not more than the soul, and nothing, not God, is greater than oneself is. Some have seen this as an atheistic view. I think it's rather a deific view. It's a very transcendental, Emersonian, can we call it that, view of the humanist divine. To see no possession, but you may possess it. Enjoying all without labor or purchase, abstracting the feast. By the way, abstracting here, the only use, the feast, yet not abstracting one particle of it. In other words, you don't need money to be a hero. Go back again to passage 48 of Song of Myself to take a look at what we said there. To take the best of the farmer's farm and the rich man's elegant villa and the chaste blessings of the well-married couple and the fruits of orchards and the flowers of gardens, obviously all this growing imagery. To take to your use out of the compact cities as you pass through. Again, go back to passage 46 of Song of Myself. To carry buildings and streets with you afterward wherever you go. You'll remember at the opening lines of Song of the Open Road, I carry my old delicious burdens with me, right? And this idea of streets, back to Song of Myself, passage 45, jostling me through the streets was the way that he said it there. Two, continuing with these twos, to gather the minds out of men. This is again a fun way to say it. To gather the minds out of men of their brains. The head versus the heart is obviously here. As you encounter them, to gather the love out of their hearts. I love to pause here and just point out that this is Whitman following on Francis Bacon's of studies. This is Whitman's view of reading. That reading is an attempt. I mean, think about the game that we're playing. This is why we call this Talks with Walt. Think about reading as a communication. Okay, and a way of dialoguing. We think of Mortimer Adler, we think of Harold Bloom, the idea that these great readers would always challenge us to try to have a conversation, to gather the minds of men. Like, what is it that Whitman is really saying in Leaves of Grass? That's kind of one of our goals here, and obviously our conversations. And then he gets personal. To take your lovers on the road with you. Go back to Song of Myself, passage 5. You'll remember my sisters and lovers. To take your lovers on the road with you. For all that, you leave them behind you. You'll remember in passage 11 that he said something very similar, right? About you have to leave them. Let's go back to it for just a second because it's such a powerful way to say it. He said, what beckonings of love you receive, you shall not only answer with passionate kisses of parting, you shall not allow the hold of those who spread their reached hands towards you. There are always going to be distractions. What is it that T.S. Eliot said in Bert Narton? Distracted from distraction by distraction. He says, we're not going to allow any of that to happen at all. To take your lovers on the road with you, for all that, you leave them behind you. And then he says it, to know the universe, again, back to our Big Five, epistemology is the first of our Big Five, as we commented, that idea of what can you know. To know the universe, go back to starting from Paumanok passage 12, all the things of the universe are perfect miracles. We've quoted that line so many times. To know the universe as a road, as many roads, as roads for traveling souls, believe it or not. This idea of traveling souls will be repeated, but this is the only time it gets used. Of course, you cannot read a line like this and not think of our Dante and the idea that all souls are traveling. Notice, even in eternity for Dante, there's still this notion of learning and growing and all of that. Notice the break. All parts away from the progress of souls. Now we're going to go from traveling souls to progress of souls to procession of souls. We're going to end the grand road. So we're going to see, he's building an argument here of journeys for everyone, right? All parts away from the progress of souls. All religion, and obviously we've commented on the idea of his religious views. I ordain myself loosed and all of that. All religion, all solid things, arts, governments. Notice his repetition of the word all. All that was or is apparent upon this globe. We think about salut amon the minute he uses the word globe, or any globe. Falls into niches and corners before the procession of souls along the grand road of souls. By the way, this word niche, we'll remember from Song of Myself, passage 13. Just to go back to it for a second, you'll maybe remember this from passage 13 of Song of Myself. We've talked about this elsewhere. In me, the caresser of life, wherever moving, backward as well as forward, slewing to niches aside and junior bending, not a person or object missing, absorbing all to myself and for this song. These echoes are all the way through the Song of the Open Road. And then he finally says it before the procession of souls along the grand roads of the universe. This word grand obviously works very well. And you'll maybe remember, as he's going to use this word grand here in a second as well, you'll maybe remember as I walked these roads, he'll say grand procession of music. Of the progress, and that's a key word, and it is a key word to understand Whitman's definition of America. There's a number of ways to attempt to define America with Whitman's Leaves of Grass. One is simply the word progress, right? Of the progress of the souls of men and women along the grand roads, notice it's plural, of the universe. All other progress is the needed emblem. We're going to come back to this word emblem in Song of the Broad Axe, passage 1. Emblem and sustenance. Now, underline and circle the word sustenance, because we're just a few minutes away now from meeting Brooklyn Ferry, impalpable sustenance of me. This word will be foundational. But then we're going to move. Now, watch this movement. And this will become in some ways a criticism of certain kinds of potential readers. The lethargic, those who are not so optimistic. I mean, some of you have said, I'm not sure that we can read this Leaves of Grass Song of the Open Road with the level of optimism that it deserves because of today. And Whitman would maybe speak directly to you now. Forever alive, forever forward. Go back to the last lines of Salute Amon for this one, and as well remember what he said at the conclusion of passage 6 of Song of Myself. Stately, solemn, sad. By the way, we're going to get 9 of these now. Stately, solemn, sad, withdrawn. We know about that in regards to Whitman. Baffled, interestingly, one of Whitman's favorite words. Mad, you'll remember this from Pent Up Aching Rivers. Turbulent, starting from Paumanok passage 7, he'll use that word. Feeble, we two clinging together, he loves this word. Dissatisfied, go back to Paumanok 6, dissatisfied faces. And then he continues. Desperate, tears, a great poem called Tears, he uses this word. Proud, fond, sick, accepted by men, rejected by men, and then it's almost as if he is cataloging so much of his own life. And then, interestingly, he gets this they going. They go, exclamation point. They go, exclamation point. I know that they go, but by the way, 5 times this they go. But I know not where they go, but I know that they go toward the best. Central, obviously, to reading Leaves of Grass, that word best. Toward something great. Notice earlier it was grand, 2 times, now it's great. Okay. Whoever you are, come forth. Now, for those of you that go, wait, where have I heard that one before? Well, you'll maybe remember it from starting from Paumanok, right? The very last lines of 13 and the beginning lines of 14. You'll remember the last lines of 13 from Paumanok. Behold, the body includes and is the meaning, the main concern, and includes and is the soul. Whoever you are, how superb and how divine is your body or any part of it. And then the opening lines of 14. Whoever you are, to you, endless announcements. So we're playing a very similar kind of game right here. Whoever you are, come forth, or man or woman come forth. Notice the exclamation points, right? Again, this come forth stuff. Scented herbage of the breast, you'll remember, come forth to remain. You must not stay sleeping and dallying there in the house, though you built it, or though it's been built for you. Go back to Song of Myself, passage 46. I will you to be a bold swimmer. You can't stay, right? This idea of timidly waiting, holding your little plank, we've talked about. And then he calls in these last lines of 13. Out of the dark confinement, out from behind the screen. Notice again the exclamation point. It is useless to protest, I know all, and expose it. All you got to do is take that line and go read T.S. Eliot's Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, Patterns on a Screen. And you'll see that, in fact, what Prufrock is doing is grappling with the very idea that's being expressed here. You got to come out from the dark confinement. Something is holding you in the dark. You'll remember this. You must wash the gum from your eyes and habit yourself to the dazzle of the light. He said in passage 46 of Song of Myself. You must not stay sleeping and dallying there in the house, out of the dark confinements, he'll say, out from behind the screen. It's useless to protest. I know all, the only time in all of Leaves of Grass that phraseology is used. I know all and expose it. You'll maybe remember this notion of exposure from passage 3 of Song of the Open Road. And then he uses the word behold. Song of Myself 40, you'll remember it. Behold, I do not give lectures. When I give myself this word behold. Behold, through you as bad as the rest. And this word of through, it's almost like you're going to get beyond it. Don't worry, you're going to get beyond it, right? Through the laughter. Now, and notice all the listings now. Through the laughter, dancing, dining, supping of people, inside of dresses and ornaments, inside of those washed and trimmed faces. Go back again to passage 48 when he talks about seeing God in the face and in his own face in the cross. Another, behold, a secret, silent, very popular word in Leaves of Grass, loathing and despair. Only use of the word loathing in all of Leaves of Grass happens right here. Again, the massive men lives of quiet desperation, loathing. No husband, no wife, no friend, trusted to hear the confession. You'll remember this idea of being ordained from earlier in part 5, right? And as well, this idea of confession, as I lay with my head on your lap, a poem we'll get to. And then he gets to this interesting idea of another self, a duplicate. And this is a key concept in Leaves of Grass. The alter ego, the alter self, we might say. A duplicate. Go back to Song of Myself, passage 42. I acknowledge the duplicates of myself, he said there. Of every one, and then he says, skulking and hiding it goes. Skulking, only use in Leaves of Grass. Spontaneous me will say that animals never once skulk. We'll get to it, right? We've given lectures on it. Hiding it goes. Formless and wordless, through the streets of the cities, polite and bland in the parlors. And then notice all these inns, there's 3 of them. In the cars of railroads and steamboats, in the public assembly, home to the houses of men and women, at the table, in the bedroom, everywhere. There's a fake inauthenticity. He says everywhere. Smartly attired, countenance smiling, form upright, death under the breastbones, hell under the skull bones. The skull bones, the only use in all of Leaves of Grass. Under the broadcloth, right, think about beneath, under the broadcloth and gloves, under the ribbons and artificial flowers, again, Leaves of Grass, artificial, the key word here. Keeping fair with the customs, speaking not a syllable of itself, speaking of anything else, but never of itself. This inability to face the truth, sounding very Emersonian, isn't it, right? How do we finish with this passage? Well, obviously honesty for Whitman is the only freedom that we can ever know. Don't be artificial in your quest to travel the open road. And to be, well, all the repetitions, the anaphoria, the rhythms, and obviously the echoes are just remarkable. At 3A, we mentioned Emerson and Thoreau. I'd like to as well mention Emily Dickinson. Notice all 3 of those great, as we call them, transcendentalist thinkers, were great critiquers of the artificial society around them. But I'd like to think of Socrates. I started with him, I'll end with him. And Plato's Republic. The unexamined life is not worth living, he will say it. Finally, at 3B, hey, some questions to own a section like this. Why is it so easy to be artificial, so hard to be authentic? Well, why is that in the pressure that we feel? We go back to a text like Orwell's Shooting an Elephant to try to capture some of that. We talked about that elsewhere in Lernstrom. Finally, how about this notion of the duplicate self? Do you have another self? And of course, our Freud and our Jung will come to mind immediately. Let's come back, Alon's, to pick up 14 and enjoy that challenge. Thank you.